Okay, we're back for another week. This week we are in the second chapter. I'm sorry, we're finishing up the second chapter of 1 Samuel. We only covered 10 verses last week, but I think that I hope you will agree that those 10 verses have so much information packed into them.
Yeah.
And they're so prophetic. It truly is a remarkable section of Scripture, a remarkable section of the Old Testament. It's not hard to understand why the Jews venerate that section so much. But we move on, and we're starting in picking up in the 11th verse of chapter 2. So let's read 11 through 17 and take those first. So he says, then Elkanah went to his home at Ramah, but the boy ministered to the Lord before Eli the priest. Now the sons of Eli were worthless men. They did not know the Lord, and the custom of the priests with the people. When any man was offering a sacrifice, the priest's servant would come while the meat was boiling with a three-pronged fork in his hand. Then he would thrust it into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. All that the fork brought up, the priest would take for himself. Thus he did in Shiloh to all the Israelites who came there. Also, before they burned the fat, the priest's servant would come and say to the man who was sacrificing, give the priest meat for roasting, as he will not take any boiled meat from you, only raw. And if the man said to him, they must surely burn the fat first, then take as much as you desire, then he would say, no, but you shall give it to me now, and if not, I will take it by force. Thus the sin of the young men was very great before the Lord, for the men despised the offering of the Lord. Now, we are going to go into sections of Leviticus because otherwise you will not understand specifically why this was so odious to God. So basically what you see here is that Eli's sons are called worthless men. In the Hebrew, they're called literally sons of Belial. Okay, Belial, of course, is used in the New Testament as well as in the Old Testament, connected to the person of Satan, so a satanic worker, as it were. I think it's ironic that Eli mistakenly called Hannah a daughter of Belial. You will see that back in chapter 1, verse 16, and accused her of being drunk and therefore abusing being around the tabernacle, but he couldn't apparently see his own son's actions. He was, self-blinded to them, clearly. Now, if you turn, there's a usage of this word in another place that I think is interesting, and it's in the prophet Nahum. So if you'll go over past Daniel and past Micah
What book?
to Nahum, the prophet Nahum, just past the book of Micah. Now I want you to go to chapter 2 of Nahum, and we're going to look at verse 6. So here, Nahum is saying, the gates of the rivers are opened, and the palace is dissolved. Interestingly enough, this is the word that's used here in 1 Samuel. The palace is dissolved, and then he goes on and talks about it's fixed, stripped away, etc., etc. And of course, he's talking about a judgment that's occurring. And this is in 1 Samuel talking about another judgment which is going to occur. So literally what he's saying in this, the implication in the Hebrew is that the gates of the rivers opened and as the palace dissolved, the word there is mog in Hebrew, dissolved, it indicates that Eli's sons and his family will dissolve away into insignificance because of their evil. And you're going to see as we go on in this chapter, that's exactly what happens. They dissolve away. And towards the end, you'll see how prophetic this is, that it actually extends hundreds of years in the future. And I'll show you in another place in the Old Testament how this prophecy is eventually fulfilled, but that's more towards the end. Now in verses 13 and 14, back to 1 Samuel, in verses 13 and 14, he makes the point that of the custom of the priests with the people when they're offering a sacrifice, etc., etc. Now what would happen is these two sons and the priests that were under them, it wasn't just them, they also taught rascals, to do the same thing that they were doing. They would supervise the worshipers during the sacrificial effort when the worshiper would bring an animal. Of course, the animal either would be a burnt offering or it could be cooked or boiled. Could be either one depending on the nature of the type of sacrifice. We're going to go into Leviticus 7 here in just a second. But what happened is these two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, and their cohorts decided to be a cute thing to do, that they'd make this three-pronged tool, which of course was never a tabernacle tool. Mm-hmm. It was their device. Mm-hmm. They would then stick it in either the burnt offering before it was burnt, okay, or the boiled offering during the time it was being boiled. And they'd pull out whatever was on the three-pronged skewer. They would grab it and remove it for their own personal use. Mm. Now, of course, the question is, and you don't understand this until you go into Leviticus, which we're now going to do, quote, what's the big deal? Why is this so odious to the Lord? Well, go over to Leviticus 7. Now, again, we are not typically people that sit around and study all the Levitical codes and offering systems and sacrifices all the time. But they all had purposes, especially those purposes were, many of them were very typological. For instance, you could have some of the sacrifices you could have for day one and day two, but you were forbidden to have them on day three. Now, what does that remind you of? I know it reminds me of.
Christ.
Exactly.
Jesus.
Right. That he was in, quote, the position of, quote, death. His body was dead during day one or day two. But of course, by day three, it was all, the sacrifice was complete. And of course, this is what Leviticus did. So Leviticus 7, starting in verse 11, I'm going to read you some of these sacrifices and you're going to see. Now, this is the law of the sacrifice of peace offerings, which shall be presented to the Lord. If he offers it by way of thanksgiving, then along with the sacrifice of thanksgiving, he shall offer unleavened cakes mixed with oil, and unleavened wafers spread with oil, and cakes of oil stirred, fine flour mixed with oil. In other words, in this offering, it was both a meal offering and a meat offering. And it's going to become clear in Samuel about that too. With the sacrifice of his peace offerings for thanksgiving, he shall present his offering with the cakes of the unleavened bread. And of this he shall present one of every offering as the contribution of the Lord. It shall belong to the priest who sprinkles the blood of the peace offerings. Do you remember anything being said about these characters spreading the blood on the peace offerings? Of course not. They didn't follow it. Verse 15, now as for the flesh of the sacrifice of his thanksgiving peace offerings, it shall be eaten on the day of his offering. He shall not leave any of it over until morning. Okay? Verse 16, but if the sacrifice of this offering is a votive or free will offering, it shall be eaten on the day that he offers his sacrifice, and on the next day, what is left over may be eaten. Verse 17, but what is left over from the flesh of the sacrifice on the third day, it shall be burned with fire. In other words, burned into ash, completely consumed. Okay? Verse 18, so if any of the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offering should ever be eaten on the third day, he who offers it shall not be accepted, and it shall not be reckoned to his benefit. That's probably an understatement. It shall be an offensive thing, and the person who eats of it shall bear his own iniquity. Verse 19, also the flesh that touches anything unclean shall be eaten. It shall be burned with fire. As for other flesh, anyone who is clean may eat of it. But the person who eats the flesh of the sacrifice of the peace offerings, which belong to the Lord, in his uncleanliness, and let me assure you, the way these priests were doing it was in a state of absolute uncleanliness, okay? That person shall be cut off from his people. The word cut off there literally in Hebrew means killed, dead. Okay, now let's apply it to what we're reading in Samuel. So in the peace offerings, the worshiper fixed both cakes, meal cakes, and a meat sacrifice. It was offered first to the Lord, right? Then a portion to the priest. Then it was shared as a communal meal, emphasizing fellowship between God and his people. In other words, his family or anyone that was with his family would then eat it on day one after those other things had occurred. Okay? So, and of course, as it said here, it must be consumed on that day or in another offering, the votive offering, the next day. And anything left on the third day, as we read, must be burnt. If, of course, it's consumed after the third day, it's a sin and an offense to the Lord. And of course, we see this, as I said, this strong warning. Now, the thing, of course, we see is that here, Phinehas and Hophni and his fellow priests were violating almost all the protocol. And why? For their own appetites. They were stealing from God's offerings. That's what they were doing, literally. And this is why it's said to be such an odious thing. They are putting themselves in very dangerous ground, okay, at this point, right in the tabernacle, doing this. Now, notice we're going to go back a little bit later. Well, actually, keep your hand here also. Back in, and I'll read it to you. In 1 Samuel 15, it says, also, before they burned the fat, the priest's servant would come and say to the man who was sacrificing, give the priest meat for roasting, as he will not take boiled meat from you, only raw. Now, that's what it says in 1 Samuel 2, verse 15. Now, notice, drop down in Leviticus 7. I told you to keep your hand there. Drop down to verse 25. And notice what it says. For whoever eats the fat of the animal from which an offering by fire is offered to the Lord, even the person who eats it shall be cut off from his people. Killed. So there's another blatant violation. They're taking the raw meat for themselves before the fat of the meat, the choice part, quote unquote, is being burnt as an offering. Okay, so they're violating that principle also. Now, also go back in Leviticus to chapter 4. I'm pulling out a few of these codes for you so you'll see what they're doing. In chapter 4, starting in verse 8, here's another code in the Levitical law. And he shall remove from it all the fat of the bull of the sin offering, the fat that covers the entrails, all the fat which is on the entrails, and the two kidneys with the fat that is on them, which is over the loins, and the lobe of the liver, which ye shall remove with the kidneys, just as it is removed from the ox of the sacrifice of peace offerings. And the priest is to offer them up in smoke on the altar of burnt offering. Okay? Now, that's what it says in Leviticus. So, but the point that he makes is, and I'm not going to read more for you in Leviticus 4, is that the rest of this was to be taken outside the camp and burnt until it became ash. In a variety of offerings, the sin offering, trespass offering, the peace offering, the portion of it could be consumed by the priest, but only in the court of the tabernacle. No one, the priest could not take it home. He had to consume it there. Otherwise, he was misusing the offering. He was not doing what God told him to do. So back to 1 Samuel 2, notice in verse 15, in 15, the priests violated these statutes totally by demanding that raw meat for their own purposes be given to them before it was burnt and sacrificed to the Lord. See? So they're violating that law. Now in verse 16 of 1 Samuel 2, and if the man said to him, they must surely burn the fat first, which is indeed what the law says, okay? Now, the worshiper he's talking about, if a man said to them, if the worshiper who brings the animal to be sacrificed, okay? If the man said to him, the priest, they shall surely burn the fat first and then take as much as you desire, then the priest would say, no, but you shall give it to me now, and if not, I will take it by force. In other words, even the worshipers that would come realized that they were doing this wrong. They were violating the Levitical law. But instead of the priest accepting that, oh, you're right, no, they would say, we're going to rough you up, okay, if you don't give us the raw meat, even before it's being offered as a burnt offering. So you can see how insistent they are about violating these Levitical codes. And again, why? Because literally they become a mafia. Literally. Okay, they've got their own crew. They steal meat from people. They do it by force, by arm twisting, or whatever threat they use. They're a mafia. This is what they become. Okay? So, now, in verse 17 of 1 Samuel 2, he says, thus the sin of the young men was very great before the Lord, for the men despised the offering of the Lord. Now, of course, we see the various violations of Levitical law, which leads to, quote, the statement, a very great sin. Notice what's happening here. This is why God is so angry at them. They come once a year, travel distances, bring expensive offerings for the Lord, and the priesthood, who's been completely corrupted, doesn't do it right, violates Levitical law, and steals part of their food. There's nothing about what they're doing that speaks of God. It's supposed to all be an example of God's holiness, his righteousness, his sacrificial system. They've completely corrupted this thing. So that, people come and they're just, I'm certain, absolutely appalled at what they see is going on. Okay? So they've really, really done something extremely offensive to the Lord. Now, let's read verses 18 through 26. We'll move on here in First Samuel 2. Now, Samuel was ministering before the Lord as a boy wearing a linen ephod. And his mother would make him a little robe, that is the covering, the ephod, okay, and bring it to him each year to year, when she would come up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. Then Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife and say, may the Lord give you children from this woman in place of the one that she dedicated to the Lord. And then they would eventually go to their own home. But the Lord visited Hannah, and she conceived and gave birth to 3 sons and to 2 daughters. And the boy Samuel grew before the Lord. Now Eli was very old, and he heard all that his sons were doing to all of Israel, and how they lay with the women who served at the doorway of the tent of the meeting. Now you have a next step that goes on. Not only are they violating all the Levitical codes selfishly, now they've decided that the women who are also Levites that were helping out at doing various tasks at the door of the tabernacle, now they're having sex with them. Okay? It's getting worse and worse. Says verse 23, and he said to them, why do you do such things, the evil things that I hear from all these people? No, my sons, for the report is not good, which I hear the Lord's people circulating. If one man sins against another, God will mediate for him. But if a man sins against the Lord, who can intercede for him? But they would not listen to the voice of their father, for the Lord desired to put them to death. Now, the boy Sam was growing in stature and in favor before the Lord and also before men. Okay, let's take this one apart now. You see here an absolute contrast between what the priesthood under Phinehas and Hophni are doing and Samuel. Samuel's but a little boy, maybe 6 or 7 or 8 years old, but he's learning the code of the law. He's learning the sacrificial system. He's learning everything, and he's honoring the Lord. Okay, he's being readied, of course, eventually to take over. So he wears this little ephod, which of course is made by his mom. She comes each year. Obviously, he gets bigger. She makes a bigger one for him. And of course, this is the time in which they visit him at Shiloh. Now, interesting, again, there's so many unique things about Samuel. As we said, he's spoken of as only second in honor to Moses. So that's a unique thing, certainly about him. But it's also unique that he starts learning his ministry at 6 or 7 or 8 years old. But the code of the law says that the Levite doesn't start his ministry as a priest before age 25 and ends at age 50. So he also, of course, is born taking a Nazirite vow. So he has some very unique characteristics about him, such that he is serving the Lord from an extremely young age and will serve the Lord all the way to the time of his death.
How old was he?
He's probably 6 or 7 years old at this point. He's a little boy. Now notice in verses 20 and 21, Eli would each year, quote, bless Hannah, all right, and would say in this blessing that he blessed her to have more children. And indeed, God, which is the emphasis here, if you notice, and the Lord visited Hannah, okay, and indeed, she ended up with 5 more children. Obviously, a total of 6 with Samuel. But it wasn't because of Eli, clearly, that she was blessed to bear more children. It was because God honored her, because she honored God. And of course, this is why she was blessed to have more children. Now, it says here, of course, that Eli was very old, and he, quote, now heard what the sins were that were being done. I would call this statement inconceivable. There is no way that they're doing all that they're doing and the level of sin that they're doing it year after year, and he doesn't know what's going on. Right. He knows what's going on. It becomes so bad, and there's so much outrage, clearly, is what's happening here, because he says he hears from other people, that somehow he now feels like he must in some way address this. That's really what's going on. So, of course, we see that this, as I said, the mafia now has moved into another area of corruption. And now, of course, they're having sex with women, literally virtually at the doorway of the tabernacle. Okay? So it's becoming unbelievable, the things that they're doing. Notice in verse 22, 23, why do you do such things the evil things that I hear from all these people, I will suggest to you very strongly that Eli was asking the wrong question. All he had to do was see what they were doing, and he would know what the answer was. It's because they were satisfying their various appetites and lived self-centered lives. And of course, the problem here was not asking them a question, why they're doing it. The issue demanded a strong action. And therefore, asking them why they're doing it is really a dumb question. He's just putting off the issue even more. You know, if you see your child stealing something from you, is it sufficient to say, why are you doing that, son or daughter? Is that sufficient? No. No, you confront them from stealing. You try to teach them the wrong of stealing. You maybe give them some kind of discipline system to try to imprint the idea that this is wrong. That's what you do. You don't reason with them about it. But this is what our culture has fallen into. Now you see with child raising, I mean, it's unbelievable what I see, you know, because I see it all the time in what the work I do. You know, I see parents having 12, 13, 14-year-old children and saying, you know, they're doing unbelievable things. And they're saying, why are you doing that? Don't you think you should put that computer game down? Lock it up.
Yeah.
Okay. Why are you asking them if they shouldn't put it down? I'm going to tell you some more things in a minute about that. But I see this as exactly the mentality of this culture and the children that are being raised. They're asking them why they're doing evil rather than stopping the evil they're doing. And so what do you get? You get corruption. So now, here are some things that I find that are exact parallel to families with kids today. Okay? They'll ask questions like, why won't you do your chores? I hear it all the time. Well, obviously, because they don't want to do chores. What's the point? Is the point asking them why they don't want to do chores? Or is the point setting up a system where you're insisting they do chores and learn to do it? Okay? Secondly, why won't you do your homework? I hear this one all the time. Johnny, why won't you do your homework? You know you're supposed to. Well, because it makes effort for him to do his homework. And when he's an undisciplined brat, he doesn't want to do his homework. So the question becomes, what are you going to do? What penalty are you going to put into it that's going to sting him enough that he's going to comply with doing homework? Okay? I mean, I'm looking at my wife here. Can you imagine thinking about how you were raised? You know, your grandparents putting up with this kind of garbage?
Wooden toys.
No, but really, they would never put up with this. No, they would insist on proper behavior, you know?
Don't argue with your.
That's right.
They say do it. Didn't put up with it.
My parents did.
No, and my parents didn't either.
And my dad just hangs on the hook and leaves.
Now, third thing that I often see, why won't you put down that computer game? I mean, these kids spend hours and hours and hours on computer games, which do nothing but feed stimulus to them constantly, which makes them even less interested in doing anything that even remotely is drudgery or repetitive whatsoever. Okay? It's an absolute, I mean, it's literally, and we have plenty of articles about the addictive nature of many video games. And yet, they're not doing it because they have the money to buy them. They're not doing it because they have their own electricity and their own room that they pay for. They're doing it because they're allowed to do it. That's the bottom line. How about the fourth one? For older kids, okay, I often will hear older kids, I mean as adults, okay, why don't you ever come to visit? I hear that frequently from older adults. They have to practically coerce their children to come and visit with them. That's horrific. What's the commandment? Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land in which you live. This is the opposite of honoring your father and mother, okay? Okay? Or another one, and I see this one all the time. Why won't you come and help out with grandma and grandpa, other family members? Well, it's inconvenient. You know, we have other things we're doing. You know, we're busy, you know. We have, you know, how many of you hear this kind of stuff? I hear it. You know, I hear it from people. I see it all around. Here's another one, okay? For instance, if the parents need to downsize, well, can't you possibly help us move from our family home? And I frequently see that their children won't do it. They'll talk to them about, well, you just need to hire movers. I literally have a family that moved up from Central Ohio to Northern Ohio, okay? And that's what it was insisted upon. Their own children who wanted them to move up there, who live up there, told them that they needed to get movers to help pack them and move them up. Unbelievable. Now, let me give you another example. We are increasingly in mental health dealing with children that are struggling with transgendered issues. Do you want me to tell you how many of them I'm dealing with? It's unbelievable. Now, can you guess why this occurs? Can you guess why? You want me to tell you how it occurs? There's a cycle here.
They're insecure, for one thing.
Well, that's yes, but okay. Number one, the schools that these children are going to, the parents don't question what's being taught. So there's a school element often, not always, but often there. Number two, these kids spend a tremendous time in chat rooms in the internet. And these are transgender chat rooms where they're taught all these concepts, all the pronouns. They hear these stories. They talk about people's lives, all this stuff. They talk about how they're transgressed against it, and they're violating their rights as transgender. I mean, it's unbelievable what's out there in these internet sites. Okay. Thirdly, they develop, and I see this all the time. They'll stay in their room. They won't make friends at school much. They won't interact with the family. They stay in the room on the internet, and they make internet friends. I hear this constantly. Well, I have my internet friends. And I go, how would you know who they are?
They're not friends.
How would you know that this isn't some old man, you know, on the internet, you know, who's a predator? How would you know? You wouldn't know. If you haven't met them in person and interact with them, you don't know any of those things. I'm telling you, they defend this to the end. You just don't understand my internet friends. You just don't understand the bond we have together. You just don't understand what we're going through. Now, here's the interesting thing. We find that transgendered people have 6 times the rate of suicide. Do you know how many of these kids have suicidal ideation? Lots of them. Lots. Do you know how many of them have depression? Lots of them.
Maybe almost all of them.
Yes. It's unbelievable. Now here's the thing, it's even more unbelievable to me. Okay? And of course, this is where potentially I get myself into deep doo-doo, but I don't care. Do you have any idea how few mental health professionals will say anything against this? Almost none will.
Why?
Because the mental health community has decided that children have a right to become this, and that anyone that would dissuade them at all is violating their rights as transgendered, interested people. Okay? Seriously. Now, here's the even worse step. Do you know how many times I get referrals from parents who have sent their child to a, quote, Christian counselor And the reason why they're seeing me now is because the Christian counselor was helping advocate transgendered ideas for the children.
Well,
I've heard it a lot. I literally got a call today and took another patient today because of that exact story. We had our 15-year-old daughter. She's having struggles with this. We were trying to deal with it. We took him to this, quote, Christian therapist, and we realized that the Christian therapist was endorsing all this in her. So we took her out, and we heard about you, and we wonder if you can help us. I get a lot of these calls. Okay? Yes,
Isn't the real problem being with the parents?
it is.
that's just what I was gonna say.
My question to you is, do you ever not see the kid, but see the parents first? and
I see the
find out?
parents first, and I lay out all the things that they're going to change if they want to combat this problem.
Mhm.
I tell them they're going to pull the internet. I'm going to tell them they're going to pull the games they're on. I'm telling them they're going to pull all of the internet friends that they're on. Okay. I mean, I literally have one, she's not a child, she's actually a young adult, who literally spends all of her non-working time on this game with her internet friends. She's married. She will do nothing with her own husband.
Oh my God.
I'm serious. I'm serious.
Well,
Because
if you
she's
look at
completely-
what's on the news with Facebook and what has been developed and shown as to what that Facebook has done, there's a reason they changed their name yesterday.
Yeah. So-
Yeah.
And so that fits with what you're talking about
Yeah.
to a T.
There is enormous effort by the schools. I just read an article about a school in Broward County that this week, I think it was this week they did it, had a field trip for elementary school children. Guess where they took their field trip?
We even want to know.
To a gay bar.
Huh? I did read that.
Yeah, Broward
I
County.
did read that.
Took their kid, never told the parents, never informed consent, took all these little kids to a gay bar and educated them on all the elements of gay words, gay concepts. I mean, they went through the menu and read what the menu items are called. They're enough to sicken you what they're calling them to begin with. I mean, they're gross, lascivious names that I won't mention, okay? But elementary school kids. Now, isn't it interesting?
Somebody is going to hell.
Yeah, isn't it interesting that Biden, when some parents started to speak up about these issues, what did he do? He said the Justice Department has a right to consider anyone who speaks up against their school board as a terrorist.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, there's enough parents that are saying, you know what, me, okay, I won't say the word, and they're going to their school board and they're demanding accuracy and they're demanding information and they're demanding to see the curriculum and they're demanding to be notified, and good for them. That's exactly what they should be. You know, the number one issue is this. If they, in my opinion, if they won't comply with the parents' request, then don't ever vote for another levy again. You'll starve them out.
Your first problem is they didn't research who they voted for.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
And
They didn't.
you know, you decided at one time to run for school.
I did.
And-
I did run.
And you're in a situation that the biggest thing that you get is propaganda. It's not what the purpose of being on the school board and being elected to be. And it's the same thing you run into in townships today.
I know.
It's
It is.
across the board. Oh, if you go to these societies that you're talking about, they preach getting on the school boards.
They do.
Preach and teach getting into the schools
Mm-hmm.
and into religious services.
Yes,
So
it's absolutely true.
Secretary of State, isn't he right now being questioned by Congress? Because he is defying what the parents want?
That I haven't read, but,
Okay, yeah, it's on the internet.
okay, all right. Yeah, but basically, they're trying to intimidate parents about their own children's
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah.
They don't want they don't want the parents to know what they're teaching. They don't want them to know when they go on field trips or what field trips are. This apparently, I was telling you about Broward County, this is not the first time they've taken this bar with this field trip. It's just the first time the parents found out about it.
Where in Broward County was this at?
I can't tell you
Were you
I can't
in
remember the
Miami?
district name, but I could find it real easily for you on the article. Yeah, but it's in South Florida.
No, I know very well about
Okay.
Broward County.
How about, well, we could go on.
Yeah.
But-
We
But the
better.
point is, these are the kind of things, we're seeing the parallel to this kind of corruption. Okay? We're seeing this kind of corruption in our own. Now, in verse 24, notice,
Are we back in?
Yeah,
we are.
and
I'm,
Samuel.
I'm done preaching for the
We
moment,
all agree with you.
for the second. Okay, in verse 24, we see, no, my sons, for the report is not good, which I hear circulating among the people. In other words, by the time Eli even brings this up, everybody knows what's going on.
Mhm.
This was in no way a secret. Everybody saw it. Everybody knew what was going on. So clearly, Eli had turned a blind eye to his own sons for a very long time.
Mhm.
Now, there is one thing that Eli says that's correct. I don't think he even knows how correct it is, but it's in verse 25. If one man sins against another, God will mediate for him. But if a man sins against the Lord, who can intercede for him? But they would not listen to the voice of their father, for the Lord. Okay? Now, that is actually correct. Eli makes a correct point. That is, in the law, if you sin against your fellow brother or sister, okay, fellow Jew, fellow whoever, okay, then there are many procedures in the law by which you can correct this. There are fines that can be paid. There's repayment of costs that are often levied in the law. Okay. There's sin offerings that can be made at the tabernacle. There are many, many things in the Old Testament law to remedy an offense between you and another person. But if they knowingly sinned repeatedly against God's own system for forgiveness, the sacrificial system, okay, then in that case, who's going to intercede for them? Okay, turn to Job chapter 9. I want you to see a verse here. It's absolutely remarkable what Job understood. So it's probably the oldest book we have in the Bible.
Mhm.
And yet Job's insight that God gives him is just sometimes unbelievable. Job 9, and we're going to read verses 30 through 33. He says, if I could wash myself with snow and cleanse my hands with lye, yet thou wouldst plunge me into the pit, and my own clothes would abhor me. For if God is not a man, as I am, that I may answer him, that we may go together to the court, there is no umpire between us, who may lay his hand upon us both. See what he's saying?
Mhm.
Exactly what Eli said. If I'm directly sinning against God, then who's the third person that's going to mediate? No one. It can't be mediated. Now, Eli's sons, of course, were totally unrepentant. They were doing great harm to the community. They show no evidence of any kind of godly behavior whatsoever. And they absolutely violate God's own tabernacle in the sacrificial system. So, God's solution to their evil was to take their lives. Now, it's interesting. This is not the only place that we hear such things. God also finally judges the evil Later, we'll see of King Saul and takes his life. Now, this is not just an Old Testament issue. I want to show you it's also a New Testament issue. Keep your place in 1 Samuel, but turn to 1 Corinthians 11. This is in the context of communion, starting verse 28. But let a man examine himself, so let him eat of the bread and drink of the cup. For he who eats and drinks judgment to himself, if he does not judge the body rightly. Notice verse 30. For this reason, many among you are weak and sick, and a number of you sleep, that is, die. Therefore, he's saying, even in the New Testament, that if one is in abject violation, and here he's talking about the seriousness of violating the communion service, that this could be a result. Turn from 1 Corinthians to your right to James chapter 5. Just past Hebrews. James chapter 5. And we'll read another verse, starting verse 19. It's at the very end of the book of James. He says, my brethren, if any among you strays from the truth, and no one turns him back, in other words, there's no repentance, okay, let him know that he who turns a sinner from the error of his way will save his soul from death and will cover a multitude of sins. So in other words, there are sins unto death. We don't know all of what they are, but there are such things. And of course, in the example of Eli's sons, there was no one that turned them back because they wouldn't listen to anyone. One more place, 1 John chapter 5. So write a little bit more past 1 and 2 Peter to 1 John chapter 5. Verse 16 and 17. 1 John 5. If anyone sees his brother committing a sin not leading to death, he will ask, and God will come, and God will for him give life to those who commit sin not leading to death. There is a sin leading to death, and I do not say that he should make request for this. All unrighteousness is a sin, and there is a sin also not leading to death. In other words, there is some level of non-repentance, even for believers, and it doesn't necessarily change, obviously, their eternal status, but God may choose to take their life for a particular reason. We know of an example of it in Acts chapter 5, right? You remember the story?
Oh, yeah.
Ananias and Sapphira.
Oh,
Ananias and Sapphira.
wrong name.
They have a piece of land. They decide on their own, no one tells them, that they're going to sell it and give it to the Lord's work. Okay? Peter warns them, make certain that this is in your heart to do it. They sell it, but they keep back a portion of the sale. Even though they're told, if you're going to do it right. They keep back a portion, okay? This is early in the church, and I think probably as an example of this kind of behavior, God says, basically Peter says to Ananias, you know, you're because of what you've done, he confronts him, he says, your life is required of you. And he dies. His wife comes in, remember the story? And Peter says, you conspired with your husband to do this thing, though you were warned, and she falls over dead. So God has reasons why at times people can do things that are potentially so misleading to other people that he may take their life. It's possible. We don't know all the conditions, all the circumstances, etc. But certainly it's clear that it can happen. Now, back to 1 Samuel chapter 2. He says, verse 26, again, here's the contrast again. Now the boy Samuel was growing in stature and in favor both with the Lord and with men. Samuel, as a young man growing up, is doing it right. He's learning God's law. He's learning God's ways. He obviously, undoubtedly, is praying. He's talking to the Lord. He's doing the right kind of things in service, as contrast to these morons, of course, that have corrupted the whole system or are doing wrong. Okay. Now, let's read verses 27 through 36, and we will finish this chapter. So, 27. Then the man of God came to Eli and said to him, "Thus says the Lord, did I not indeed reveal myself to the house of your father when they were in Egypt, in bondage to Pharaoh's house? And did I not choose them from all the tribes of Israel to be my priests, to go up to my altar, to burn incense, to carry an ephod before me? And did I not give to the house of your father all the fire offerings of the sons of Israel?" Verse 29. Why do you kick at my sacrifice and at my offering, which I have commanded in my dwelling, that is the tabernacle, and you honor your sons above me by making yourselves fat with the choicest of every offering of my people Israel? Verse 30. Therefore, the Lord God of Israel declares, I did indeed say that your house and the house of your father should walk before me forever. But now the Lord declares, far be it from me, for those who honor me, I will honor, and those who despise me, I will lightly esteem. Verse 31, behold, the days are coming when I will break your strength and the strength of your father's house, so that there will not be an old man in your house, and you will see the distress of my dwelling, in spite of all that I do good for Israel, and an old man will not be in your house forever. Yet I will not cut off every man of yours from my altar, that your eyes may fail from weeping and your soul grieve, and all the increase of your house will die in the prime of life. And this will be the sign to you which shall come concerning your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas. On the same day both of them shall die. But I will raise up for myself a faithful priest, who will do according to what is in my heart and in my soul. And I will build him an enduring house, and he will walk before my anointed always. And it shall come about that everyone who is left in your house shall come and bow down to him for a piece of silver or a loaf of bread, and say, please assign me to one of the priest offices so that I may eat a piece of bread. Okay, so let's go through this and figure out what's going on here. A man of God comes and makes a confrontation. The word there in Hebrew is Ish Elohim, a man of God. Someone who has apparently studied and prayed and listened to the voice of the Lord and is willing to be one sent. By the way, you know what the New Testament word for one who is sent is? We call him an apostle. That's the word. That's what it means, one who is sent. So he's willing to be an apostle of the Lord in this situation. He is given here a special message, not a good one, for Eli and his household. Okay? Here are the elements of what he's told. He tells Eli that he gets the word of the Lord. And of course, this man of God, you have to say, is a commendable person, is a righteous person, and a courageous person, because he's making a confrontation with the high priest of Israel. So he's pretty confident about the Lord leading him. Jack,
It never identifies who the man of God is.
never does. He's just someone who is faithful and righteous, and God uses him and gives him this ministry, okay? Now, it's interesting. What he reminds him of is this. All of his ancestors, that is Eli's, are descendants of Aaron and are from the tribe of Levi, right? God picked the tribe of Levi to be his special priests, okay, servants, and he picked Aaron's descendants to be the priests. You could only be a priest in the tabernacle, later the temple, if you were a descendant of Aaron. Keep that in mind because you're going to see what's going to happen here. Okay? Now, he reminds Eli that his ancestors, that is Aaron's descendants, were specifically protected by the Lord and were called for approximately 400 years ago upon leaving Egypt. It is during this time that God set up the Levitical system, right? And called them as priests. They were chosen to be priests. They were taught various offerings and duties in the tabernacle. Now in verse 29, it states they were to make sacrifices and offerings. They're interesting words here in the Hebrew. Sacrifices is zivah, which means meat sacrifices, and the offerings is the word mincha, which means plant or grain sacrifices. So meat sacrifices, grain sacrifices. Now, he says they've shown contempt for all the sacrifices, literally from A to Z. Every single one, the sin offering, the peace offering, all of them, okay, they've shown contempt for. And he says that you've honored your two sons before me. Notice what's said in Exodus 20, verses 2 and 3. You will honor the Lord, there shall be no other gods before me. They sure broke, Eli and his family broke those commandments very much. Now, it's interesting, when you read the scripture, particularly the New Testament, you find an order that occurs in life for the believer and in relationship to the family also. Per the scriptures, one is to honor God first, always, okay? One is to honor, if they're married, their wife second. One is to honor their parents third, and one is to honor their children fourth, okay? Children are supposed to honor their parents as they get older. Children, of course, it's interesting. I want to show you this in the New Testament. You can keep your place in 1 Samuel, but I want you to go to 1 Timothy 4. I want you to read this, and I want you to see how backwards it's become in much of the church. 1 Timothy 4. And I'm going to read several verses starting in verse 3. Let me see if I have this right. I'm sorry, it's chapter 5, not chapter 4. So go to 1 Timothy 5, wrote down wrong. All right, here, starting verse 3. Here's what Paul's telling the church to do. Honor widows who are widows indeed. And notice what he says. But if any widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to practice piety in regard to their own family and to make some return. Underline that word, return to their parents, for this is acceptable in the sight of God. Here's the principle. As you raise children, and make all the sacrifices that we make for them. Use the resources of our money, give them opportunities in their education, in their vocation, in their college, and everything that we do. God says the proper response of children is to make a return on what their parents have invested in them. When they become older and their parents are old, they are supposed to honor them by helping out, if necessary, financially. What he's telling the church here is don't you dare give money to a widow if her own children won't take care. I mean, her own children should take care of her. If she has children, grandchildren, they're the ones, not the church, that should take care. Look what he says also in verse 5.
Is this First Timothy?
1 Timothy 5. Now she who is a widow indeed, and who has been left alone, in other words, no children or grandchildren, okay, she's obviously, her husband's died, okay, has fixed her hope on God and continues in entreaties and prayers day and night. Then he dropped down to verse 8 then, okay. But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his own household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever.
Amen to that.
That's strong language. If we have children that claim they're Christians, and if we have a legitimate need and they won't help out, then he's saying you have to question whether they are Christians. Because they've denied the faith and act worse. In other words, a lot of unbelieving children in those families do better than they do in this case. Also, drop down to verse 16. If any woman who is a believer has dependent widows, let her assist them, and let not the church be burdened, so that it may assist those who are widows indeed. In other words, his point is that if you have someone that's a widow in your family, okay, that's a relative, you should be figuring out, or how other relatives with you should be figuring out how to help them. Okay?
In other words, it's always kind of on you rather than you trying to move
Pan it off on the church.
responsibility to someone else.
It's someone else. Make a return. You know, I can't tell you I can't tell you the stories I've heard of people that have elderly parents. Sometimes there's been divorces and such things, but still there's elderly parents. And I've heard so many people say, well, I'm not responsible for them. I mean, I had one woman that told me this not too long ago, and she said, I'm not responsible. And I looked at her and I said to her, so who's your neighbor according to what Jesus said? Anyone who has need. So what do you mean you're not responsible? You know, I find this a pathetic attitude in our culture.
They must not understand the word honor.
They don't. They don't care about it. Many of them. Now some do. Some are honorable, but a lot of them are not. You know, my wife told me a story a while back because, you know, she understands the Asian mindset, obviously having traveled in China and all these things. And she told me an interesting story that I remember. This is what I want to tell you about Korean people. You know what it is, honey? You want to say it or you want me to say it? Okay. In Korea, it is an honor and a responsibility to take care of your parents and older relatives. If you take them on a trip, you are forbidden by tradition to have them pay a cent. If you do things for them, you're forbidden to be repaid for what you do for them. It is your honor and responsibility and joy to take care of your older relatives. They take them on trips, they give them gifts, and they would never ever consider those people opening their wallet and being paid back for it. That would be a disgrace in Korean tradition. Now, isn't it amazing?
Isn't that the way we do it in America?
Isn't that the way we do it or should do it?
Should do it.
So I said, do it in America just to see what you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Wrong. It's the way we should do it.
I
In
think the Amish
generations
are-
past, they
But
did.
but isn't it amazing, though, that number one, the first thing that Americans want to do, and I'm not saying there's no exceptions to this. Okay, I'm just saying as a principle in general, the first thing they want to do is push it off into the government. Let the government do it. Now, I understand there are situations in which the government has to do it. Most people are not equipped to pay $6,000 a month for nursing home care for an elderly person who needs nursing home care. Most people just don't have that resource. And so they go on Medicaid and the government takes care of it. I understand that. But there's a lot of ways in which people can help.
Well,
But-
he said, like the Amish,
Yes,
very good about taking care of their family.
they are. They will take care of their own.
They build a house onto their house.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Isn't that interesting? Do you realize, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Do you realize what the tradition is in Jewish marriage? Traditional Jewish marriage is?
Oh, yes.
You betroth your future wife,
Mhm.
and you go and you build a room onto your house.
Mhm.
And when the room is finished, then you gather your friends and that becomes your wedding night. Okay?
You go get her unannounced.
You go get her unannounced. Of course, it's also an image of the rapture of the church.
Mhm.
But, you provide for her by building on to a family dwelling.
Mhm.
So, yeah,
I just wanted to
yes,
add that, the Amish will not take their elderly parents on a trip
Because,
and of any kind, because the elderly parents don't really like the rickshaw that they have to go in.
the rickshaw,
the buggy,
right,
are you being
the
funny?
rickshaw.
You're bad.
That's a joke.
You're bad.
Okay.
Let's stay serious here for a minute.
All right.
Kind of fell a little short.
Yeah, right, well.
Now, what he's saying in verse 30, let's go back to 1 Samuel 2, verse 30. Okay? He says, therefore the Lord God of Israel declares, I indeed say that your house and the house of your father should walk before me forever. But now the Lord declares, far be it from me, for those who honor me, I'll honor. And then he says, and those who despise me will be lightly esteemed. And then he goes on also in verse 31. What he's saying here is that Eli's family male members who would normally become priests will now not necessarily be priests.
Did Levi have other sons?
Yes. No, Aaron had other sons.
Well,
We're
Aaron,
talking about Aaron's sons for the priesthood.
right,
Aaron had 4 sons. 2 of them died because they did a despicable thing before the Lord.
right,
The other 2 survived, and all the priests came from one of those 2 lines.
right.
I'm going to talk about it in just a second here. So, all of the older grandsons and grandsons and sons of grandsons, he says now, will not live long lives. They will die in their prime. There'll be no old men in the future of his household. This is part of the judgment that he's received because of what he's allowed.
Mhm.
And of course, he then says that Phinehas and Hophni will then die on the same day.
Mhm.
He then says in verse 31, 32, that there's going to be a new leadership. Do you see it? He says, but 35, I'll raise up for myself a faithful priest who will do according to what is in my heart and my soul. This, of course, is an allusion to Samuel. He's going to be the replacement.
Right.
Samuel will be a prophet, a priest, and also a leader, an official. He'll be all those 3. Now, in the normal support of the priesthood, obviously they receive food and goods, but because Eli's sons abused the system, they will be removed from this, and they will end up, and you'll notice in verse 36, and it shall come about that everyone who's left in your house shall come and bow down to him. This is an allusion to Samuel, for a piece of silver or a loaf of bread, and say, please assign me to one of the priest's offices that I may eat a piece of bread. They will literally come to him and they will ask to have some type of work that he will grant them so that they can earn enough money just to buy a loaf of bread. Okay? It's quite a serious retribution for what they've done. Now, it's interesting about this prophecy. That is, that the man of God gives. He never says exactly when these things will occur. And what you find is some of them occur more immediately. Some of them occur to people down the line in Eli's household. Okay? Some of them occur sooner, and some of them occur later. Now, it's also interesting. This is an application of Hannah's song. I'll read it to you. Back earlier in chapter 2. Boast no more, and so very proudly. Do not let arrogance come out of your mouth. For the Lord is our God of knowledge, and with him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty will be shattered, and the feeble gird on their strength. Those who were full hire themselves out for bread. Okay? But those who were hungry cease hunger. She's already prophesying there would be people this way. And this is exactly what's happening to
She
Eli's.
didn't know any attorneys, did she?
No, she didn't. She didn't. And it probably is a good thing. Now, I want you to notice something. There are several different applications of this prophecy. It occurs sooner, it occurs later, and finally it occurs in a final form. Turn to 1 Kings chapter 2. 1 Kings chapter 2. I just went a little too far here. And we're going to look at verses 26 and 27. Now, this is during the time of Solomon. Okay? He has a high priest that is in his service. Okay? And the high priest's name, let me make certain about this. Is Abiathar. Okay, so verse 26. Then to Abiathar, the priest, the king said, go to Anaroth to your own field, for you deserve to die. But I will not put you to death at this time, because you carry the ark of the Lord our God before my father David, and because you were afflicted in everything with which my father David was afflicted. Verse 27. So Solomon dismissed Abiathar from being the high priest of the Lord in order to fulfill the word of the Lord, which he had spoken concerning the house of Eli at Shiloh. Interesting, isn't it?
What chapter?
Chapter 2 of 1 Kings.
Okay.
This is probably a good 100 years after Eli that this prophecy is coming true. Now, here's the thing that's interesting about it. You find that through of the two sons that still were living, that survived of Aaron's, okay, there was Ithamar, and Ithamar, if you look through this, is in Eli's lineage. But they will be deposed by another son's lineage. His name, Aaron's son, was Eleazar. Okay? And through that lineage, this high priest will be dismissed, and a new one through Eleazar's lineage will be promoted, and his name is Zadok. And you'll see that that he becomes the high priest during Solomon's time. 100 years later, it all occurs according to the way God predicted it's going to happen. He works through the lineage, he works through people, and he brings his will out through all of this. Now, again, this is partly fulfilled by Samuel. It's later fulfilled, as we just read, in the days of Solomon, but ultimately, it's fulfilled at a later time. Turn to the book of Hebrews, chapter 7. And we'll close with this tonight. Hebrews 7. And we're going to start in verse 12. For when the priesthood is changed, of necessity there takes place a change of law also. For the one concerning whom these things are spoken belongs to another tribe, from which no one has officiated at the altar. For it is evident that our Lord was descended from Judah, a tribe with reference to which Moses spoke nothing concerning priests. No priest ever came from the tribe of Judah, only from the tribe of Levi. Okay? Verse 15. And this is clearer still. If another priest arises, according to the likeness of Melchizedek, who has become such not on the basis of law, of physical requirement, but according to the power of an indestructible life. For it is witnessed of him, and he quotes in Genesis here, for thou art a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. And who's he talking about? Who's a priest forever, according to Melchizedek? Jesus Christ. So the final priesthood, interestingly, will be Christ's priesthood, but it won't be a Levitical priesthood. It won't be an Aaronic priesthood, but rather it will be from a final tribe, not through lineage, but through appointment. Okay? So, that's chapter 2.
Very good.
All right?
Thank you.
So let's finish with prayer. I'll pray for us here. Lord, thank you for tonight. Thank you for your word. Thank you for all the elements in it that weave their way through the Old Testament and into the New Testament as we see what begins in the old, finishes in the new. What's a shadow in the old becomes clear in the new. And we see this pattern over and over and over again in your word. Thank you for your Holy Spirit who weaves all these truths and makes them happen exactly as you predicted they would. Thank you for this evening, and we pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.